All right, once you have chosen the size you're going to make and you've chosen the option you're going to sew, whether it be the scrappy, the scrap stash, or the 4-color version, it is time to start cutting. So cutting is pretty straightforward in this pattern. The diagrams will show you exactly how to cut each pre-cut, but I have a few things I want to share with you about cutting. So if you're doing the scrap stash option, obviously you're just going to start cutting pieces from your scraps. You can actually do this with any of the pre-cuts also. So if you want to skip any strip piecing and you want to get the most amount of pieces out of each pre-cut that you use, you could just cut pieces and forget about cutting strips. Just cut the pieces from those pre-cuts. And then you would just be sewing together sections of 2. So that's one option. Just cut pieces, skip the strip piecing. So you can use fat quarters, quarter yards, jelly roll strips, or even half yards or fat ace for this pattern. So you can pretty much use anything. If you're going to be buying specifically for this pattern, I would recommend fat quarters over anything else. And with fat quarters, the cutting diagram is there. You can cut both ways. You can cut on the long side, cut strips on the long side, or you can cut strips on the short side. I recommend cutting your strips on the short side. You will have a lot less wasted fabric if you cut your strips going this way. You can cut it this way if for whatever reason you prefer. I don't know if it's the bias and non-bias. I don't know bias. If you prefer cutting a certain way, one way will be a little stronger than the other. You can absolutely cut that way. It's just a little more wasted fabric than if you cut this way. So you can also use jelly roll strips. You can use with a fabric strip. So a width of fabric would be like that quarter yard or half yard where you have an entire width of fabric, 42 inches. They usually come folded in half. And the pattern has you cutting them in half after you cut the strips. Now you actually could skip that step and just leave them long strips and that would be fine. And here's actually the thing about leaving them long like this. So most of you could probably get 5 units from your width of fabric. The pattern only recommends 4 because it will get a little bit tight for 5. But if your width of fabric is like a full 42 and a half, 43 inches, you should be able to actually get 5, which means you'll need less fabric, less strips, and less strip sets. Now I didn't write the pattern that way because there will be too many instances where people won't have enough room to get that 5th unit from their width of fabric. If you're using jelly rolls, which I know a lot of people have a lot of jelly rolls, they love to sew with them. They're really awesome pre-cut because you get the full bundle of fabric all wrapped up in these cute little strips. Now you can cut in half like the pattern says, or do the same thing, keep your strips long. You also could just take your strips and cut your sections from it and skip the strip piecing. Again, you'll have the least amount of wasted fabric if you do it that way. It's just with strip piecing, it does speed up the cutting and the sewing process just a little bit. I've just kind of enjoyed strip piecing lately. I think it's just kind of a fun way to quickly make quilts. Okay, so that is the cutting basics. There isn't much to it. The pattern has all the diagrams you need, tells you how many units to cut for each size. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, we are going to move on to the next step, which will be assembling our blocks.